You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Fast ship. Never heard of the William Fall?
Should I have?
It's the ship that made the Kessel run in less than 12 parsecs.
What a piece of junk.
Covering Star Wars vehicles in less than 12 parsecs, this is Start Your Engines.
Don't get technical with me.
Here are your hosts, Paul Naylor and Mark Newbold.
You're listening to Start Your Engines. I'm your co-host Mark Newbold, and joining me today is a fella who, well, have you even passed your driving test?
It's debatable. It was a long time ago.
Right, milk float then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. It's Paul Naylor. How you doing, Paul?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
I'm very well. We convened today to celebrate Star Wars Podcast Day. It's 24 years since Jedi Talk launched on the 7th of February, 1999. So every year, us and a number of other podcasts, other Fantha podcasts, we've got Desert Planet, Planet Layer and Making Tracks, all celebrating Star Wars Podcast Day today. So we thought we would talk about one of the smaller vehicles on this mini episode.
Yeah, let's do a small episode.
Let's do a small episode. This is the 74Z speeder bike, or 74Z, as our American cousins would say. That's the classic speeder bike from Return of the Jedi.
The first time we saw one.
The first time we saw
Originally.
one. Well, that's true. Chronologically, not so much, but actually in real world, yeah. Again, like we kick off most episodes, you know, what are your memories of seeing that speeder bike for the first time? Because, I mean, the first time I really remember it outside of the film, obviously, was the vehicle that we sitting right over there.
It was nicely placed in terms of pocket money availability, wasn't it?
It really was.
It was sort of same sort of price point as a mini rig.
Yep.
So, but it was a full-size ship. It was one of the first images I remember seeing as well from the film. There was a model shop in the town I grew up, and it had a number of things. They had a catalogue, and you flick through it, and it was one of the ones that they actually did reveal.
Yeah.
Whereas there were other things, I think Jabba's Palace was there, but they didn't reveal.
Yes.
That was all blacked over.
I think, where is it now? I don't think it's quite here, but I have got Jabba's Palace on the other side of the room, yeah.
Yeah. So the speeder bike, straight away, it looked like it was going to play a significant role in what was then Revenge of the Jedi.
That's right.
But yeah, it looked cool. When the actual one came out, the boxed version, it looked good. It looked like it was straight from the screen. Some of the Star Wars vehicles, as we know, didn't necessarily look exactly like they should. It had got all sorts of functions on it. You could blow it apart.
Yeah.
You'd got those flaps that most people still are scrabbling around trying to find.
True, we're always trying to find the flaps.
You owe me a flap.
I think I do owe you a flap, actually. I'll have to have a look around and see if I've got any spare flaps.
But yeah, it was a great little vehicle. And of course, the people at Lucasfilm, they cleverly did it in such a way where you'd want more than one.
Yes.
Because, you know, there was at least 5 in a chase at one point, I think.
There was, yeah. Count them all down, yeah.
So you needed one for your Luke, one for your Leia, and some for your Scout Troopers. But yeah, it was a great little vehicle.
So yeah, I remember vividly, you mentioned model shop. I remember having the Airfix speeder bike.
Yeah.
Which was actually, when you put it together, it was quite a size. It was almost like a 6-inch figure size.
Right, okay.
But I was not crafty, so I managed to put it together just about, but I was also very impatient, and the only paint I had was paint that I'd used to paint like a Spitfire.
Nice.
So for some reason I just painted my whole speeder bike and Biker Scout green.
Cool.
No, it was not cool. It was terrible.
Well, yeah, you say that, but perhaps you were a bit ahead of your time, because there's like a Clone Wars variant version of the Scout Trooper.
There is.
That looks green, so
yeah.
you were ahead of your time.
I'd like to claim premonition, but I can't.
Manufacturer.
It was manufactured by Aratech Repulsor Company. They made a lot of swoops and speeder bikes back in the day, because all of Star Wars is back in the day, because it's a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It's the 74Z speeder bike, and if you wanted to buy one, 3,000 credits. Now, these are military vehicles which did later, many years later, come onto the private market. So if you wanted to pick up a speeder bike, and I assume most people, if they did, they would mod it and do their own things to it.
Technical specifications.
3.3 metres long. Now, that's a long vehicle.
Yeah.
You don't really appreciate when you go to conventions, usually the Legion and obviously the UK Garrison will have vehicles like this.
Yeah.
And I know at National Space Centre when we were there, we saw one.
That, yeah.
You know, and they're a decent size, aren't they?
They
I mean,
are.
you would never say they were 3.3 metres long, would you?
No, and you
You'd say they were 9 foot.
you and your Imperial men.
Oh, well, it seemed appropriate.
But yeah, no, they are a sizable vehicle. I was just thinking that the last time we were over at the Space Centre, we saw one of those kids having a photo taken on it. They're a lovely prop, aren't they, to look at as well?
Really are.
Certainly, you're sort of just talking there about where it was actually built, and the fact when we mentioned swoop bikes, when you watch Star Wars now, as in A New Hope.
Yeah.
We've got the swoop bike that's been added into the scene on the approach to Mos Eisley
Yes.
with the Ronto. But we essentially didn't see a speeder bike until 1983.
They've kind of retconned them into Hoth, haven't
retcon
they?
everything, yeah. So retcon them into Hoth, yeah. So allegedly they were on about the Hoth.
Yeah.
Now, my lad, when he was little, collected the Galactic Heroes line of Star Wars figures.
Yeah.
And bundled in with the AT-AT Walker, which was a great toy anyway, was a white version of the already available in Galactic Hero line, the brown speeder bikes. There was a white one. I'm trying to remember what the pilot was. It might have even been, I think it was an AT-AT driver, but it was a lovely little edition.
Emails to radio@fantasytracks.com.
It's in the loft somewhere. That was just such a nice little thing to add into that set, just to sort of acknowledge that these things might have been there. Just because you didn't see them doesn't mean they weren't there.
True, and that is the true nature of retconning, which Star Wars does better than pretty much anything else.
Maximum atmospheric speed.
500 kilometres an hour, which is 310 miles per hour. So this thing can really go, not pod racer fast, or riot racer fast probably, but really fast. But more than that, when you think the skill it would take to pilot that through the redwoods, I mean, they're big trees, but through the redwoods.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I was just thinking, could you navigate that through all those big trees? No.
Well, a lot of those guys didn't, did they?
They didn't. No, they didn't. They didn't quite make it through.
Yeah.
But even to attempt it, whether they were actually going full pelt,
it makes you wonder, doesn't
Yeah.
it? I mean, they're obviously trained,
I
and
know.
Luke and Leia are force sensitive, so obviously they
Yeah.
have that additional,
Yeah.
benefit.
Yeah, whether Leia realised it or not at that stage. But, I mean, I would imagine 300, you're going to do that on an open plane somewhere.
Oh, sure,
Like
definitely.
we saw Anakin in Episode 2.
Or even in Mandalorian when they're going over the sand dunes on
absolutely.
Tatooine. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it was interesting as well. Do you remember on the making of Return of the Jedi where you see them, how they filmed that scene?
Oh, the
So
animatic.
the animatic with the 12-inch action figures.
Yeah.
They basically took a load of cameras out into the redwood forests. And then sped up that footage.
That's right.
And then
With the Steadicam.
pilots with the Steadicam, yeah. It was beautifully thought out. I can't think of anybody that I remember from when I was a kid that didn't have the speeder bike, because it was an entry-level affordable vehicle.
That's a good way of putting it, entry-level vehicle. It was, yeah. And like I say, you look at Jedi, in terms of the toys at least, whilst Empire had that first range of mini-rigs, stuff that was like kind of practical and in situ on Hoth, Jedi was really great because you had the Ewok catapult, you had the hang glider, you had the Endor Forest Ranger. There was vehicles that really were, like you say, affordable for the collectors.
Yeah, things that worked for those that weren't going to be getting the large-scale Ewok village instantly.
Yes. Which I still haven't got. I still want.
Nor me. Never
still
had
want it.
It was certainly a pipe dream even back then in the early 80s.
Yeah.
But the chances were that you'd get the hang glider and you'd get the catapult because they were probably £5 or something like that.
Well, especially when Tesco and all those Predis were sort of knocking them out for £1.50 just to get shot of them.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing.
It really is, isn't it? It really is.
Sensor systems.
Sensor systems, it had a terrain sensor. Clearly, you would need a terrain sensor to be able to navigate places like the forests of Endor. An optical sensor, similar situation. And a jammer, which of course we know.
Yeah.
Hit the jammer center switch, so we know exactly where that is on the console.
And the comlink.
Exactly.
Yep.
And it had the onboard comlinks as well.
Yep.
So sparse. I mean, it's not going to have a lot of stuff on it. It's meant to be as light as possible, generally just piloted by one biker scout or one operator.
Yeah.
Obviously, it can fit somebody on the back.
Yeah.
Navigation system.
Terrain sensor, as we've just mentioned. You'd need that, wouldn't you? You'd need something.
You
know,
would.
you can fly by the seat of your pants for so far, but that would only take you so far, wouldn't it?
Obviously, when you're a kid, when you see a speeder bike in any other environment than a forest, it feels a bit odd.
It doesn't look right, does it?
It doesn't look right because it feels like that's where it belongs.
It's like the snow speeder, isn't it? We know it's it's an air speeder. We know that it was retconned and retrofitted rather for
But
for
they
the
talk
snowy
about
environment.
it in a film, we've been having trouble adapting the speeders.
That's right. But if you see that vehicle, I mean, you did see one in Obi-Wan Kenobi,
Obi-Wan.
and it was really cool to see it. But it didn't feel right not flying over the snowplains of Hoth.
No, it felt like it was flying too high.
Yeah. Yes.
And it just felt out of place.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I think, until they started calling them swoop bikes, that were sort of adaptations, sort of slightly different versions of the speeder bike, that you could accept it in other environments other than just redwood forests.
Yeah. But
yeah.
you think if you're flying that on Coruscant, you'd want to be Dexter Jettster's calf level on the road, not Anakin and Obi-Wan up in the high rises on one of those, would you?
My goodness, no. I mean, I would like to think that the speeder bike's probably got a maximum hovering height.
Oh, they have a flight ceiling. Yeah, not that much. Not that much.
Yeah.
Weapons systems.
It had an AX-20 blaster cannon that sits underneath it. You see in that beautiful Macquarie painting with Luke on, and you see the flash coming from the muzzle of the blaster. Not a lot of armament, but and not a lot of weaponry, but it wouldn't, like you say...
It's like a hand blaster, really.
Yeah, and it's a patrol vehicle, really, isn't it? It's not something you generally send into war. That would be the scout ahead of the scout walker.
Yeah. If you've got a scout walker, you've got to have the speeder bikes as well.
It feels like they would be a complementary set, doesn't it?
Yeah.
They'll probably come in one big pack the Empire buys from the shop.
I think at some point they were bundled together, weren't they, in later lines of action figures, back in the 90s and early 2000s.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
It's had some appearances. We just mentioned, of course, it first appeared in Return of the Jedi, but it also turned up in Battlefront 1 and 2. It was in a deleted scene, believe it or not, from Attack of the Clones, but you did see it in Revenge of the Sith.
Right.
Which is kind of cool that vehicle has got that much of a history and a lineage. It's turned up in plenty of comics: Han Solo, Imperial Cadet, Bounty Hunters, Crimson Reign, Dr. Aphra, the ongoing Star Wars title. It also turned up in Star Wars Battle Pod, which weirdly came up in an episode of Making Tracks recently. Battle Pod, I've not thought about that forever, but you could actually fly a speeder bike in that. And of course, Star Wars Trilogy Arcade, riding the speeder bike through the trees.
A great level on the Lego Star Wars Return of the Jedi, well, the complete saga.
That's right.
There's a great level with the speeder bikes on that.
And also, going back to Jedi era, it was in the Ewoks Join the Fight book and record.
Yeah.
Hand-painted, beautiful artwork in there. So it's been seen in a lot of stuff, and of course, we saw it in The Mandalorian, in The Gunslinger.
And not forgetting as well, and I never had one, I think probably some of the high-end collectors like Gus have probably got them.
Yeah.
There was that child speeder bike that you could buy to sit on.
That's true.
Pedal one.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I know that there's one at Rancho Obi-Wan. I do know that. I mean, can you imagine owning one of those now? I mean, you couldn't ride it, but,
No, but crazy prices for those.
Oh,
yeah.
But so cool. And obviously, we're recording this in 2023. It's the 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi. Very appropriate that we're talking about these vehicles.
Makes us feel very old.
I said this to somebody the other day, how Star Wars feels like it's getting on for 50 years old.
Yeah.
And Empire feels like it's out, but Jedi still weirdly feels like it's closer to us than Father.
I think it's probably just because when you're young, the difference between what you were at 7 or 8 years old is vastly different to what you were at 12, 13.
And also, I think Jedi was the first film that most of us had available to us to regularly watch.
Yes.
Okay, we had Star Wars.
Yeah.
If you recorded Star Wars on the telly, then sure. But Jedi felt like the most accessible.
Yeah.
I know it was the first one I saw on pirate video. Shouldn't admit to that, but I did. So Jedi felt, I think for the longest time, most people, it was their favourite because it was so kinetic and so fast moving. And this vehicle, the speeder bike, is literally the visual embodiment of speed and pace. It's George Lucas's wet dream, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, in the original Star Wars, obviously you got the attack on the Death Star. You've got that in Return of the Jedi as well. But in a way, the speeder bike scene is almost the equivalent of the Battle of Hoth. It's that ground assault. It's a very different sort of pace to the rest of the film.
And it's very grounded in a very Earth-like environment as well, isn't it?
It's something that as kids you could easily go out and repeat. I think I had a rally chopper at the time.
Yeah.
And my mates on their BMXs, and we'd be riding around the woods. We'd be playing something called Cone Wars.
Right.
Which, I wonder where we got that title from.
No idea.
Where we'd be throwing cones from our bikes at each other. But we were speeding around as...
That's not what I expected Cone Wars to be, got to be honest.
Those two scenes, Hoth in Empire and Endor in Jedi, are so grounded and so sort of easy for us to imagine and recreate.
Yeah.
And surely that's done on purpose as well.
And like you say, when you watch The Making of Jedi and you see Dennis Muren and the team putting the toilet roll trees up and, like you said, the 12-inch figures on the speeder bike mock-up and just getting the movement and how close it was to what they actually shot and just the process of doing the Steadicam Garrett Brown stuff and going out into the Redwoods and walking and getting all that footage. I watched an interview recently with Carrie Fisher, which would have been in '83, talking to David Letterman, and it just makes me smile how now everyone is so media trained, and Carrie was almost as acerbic and laid back as Harrison Ford. The knowledge of the technology was just not there, and it was just fascinating to watch her talk about specifically this sequence from Jedi, about the speeder bike sequence. They showed a little clip. It was fantastic. Good time to be celebrating Return of the Jedi, and definitely a good time to be celebrating Star Wars Podcast Day.
Happy birthday, Podcast Day. I didn't realise that it was that old.
Yeah, there is older Star Wars audio, but as a formal, what you would consider now a podcast.
Yeah. Were the classes podcasts back then?
I don't think, this conversation's happened before. I think the title, the sort of phraseology for what it is way more modern than that. Yeah. I know I was doing what you would call a podcast in sort of 2005. I don't remember podcast being a thing. It's a more recent thing, but the concept,
label podcast seems a lot newer, doesn't it?
Yeah. It must come from like iPod.
Yeah,
it must do.
Yeah,
but nevertheless, as a Star Wars talk show, as a piece of audio, Jedi Talk was the first one. 7th of February 1999. Phantom Menace is just about to come out.
So next year, 25th anniversary.
Yep.
Which hopefully we'll be back talking about something else.
We'll make sure that all 4 Fantha shows that talked about it this year are doing it again next year. We'll try and get Collector's Cast. We'll try and get Adam to do Fantha Down Under. We'll try and do a Cannon Fodder.
Should we record it now?
But we will be remiss not to mention that on the 7th to the 10th of April, it's Star Wars Celebration Europe at the XL on the Thames. Yep. There's loads of cool things happening. Fantha Tracks have got a number of podcasts that are going to be involved in the podcast stage or the HoloNet news stage. A number of us are doing talks and panels. There's loads going on. Fantha Tracks is in the zone with the Rebel Legion, Mando Mercs, Saber Guild and the Dark Empire, so we're going to be very busy in there. Come and see us if you've got the time. Grab a badge, grab a pin, grab a handshake, whatever you can get. And also in the evenings, there's stuff happening on all of the evenings. Thursday, the 6th of April, is Boonta Eve. Friday, the 7th, is Return of the Bash, which is the UK Garrison Jedi News event. On Saturday, the 8th, on the River Thames itself, it's Sail Barge to Celebration, which is the Fantha Tracks, Rebel Legion, Mando Mercs, Dark Empire and Saber Guild event, which we're really looking forward to. And then on Sunday the 9th, it's #Cantina at the Indigo at the O2. And if you're sticking around and you've got a VIP ticket, come to the King's Row, the after show, because Fantha Tracks are hosting the VIP after show at the O2. It's all going to be amazing. Loads of information about this all on Fantha Tracks. We're going to be talking about it on all the podcasts. But if you get the chance, come and say hi and enjoy everything that Celebration's got to offer.
What he said.
If you want to be a part of the action and stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news, visit fanthatracks.com or check out the free Fantha Tracks app through the App Store to follow us on your mobile device. You can reach out to us and send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@fanthatracks.com. Comment, like and share on any of our social media feeds at Fantha Tracks. And be sure to subscribe, leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. And as always, thanks to James Temple for composing the Fantha Tracks intro and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. Remember, tune into Good Morning Tatooine. It's live Sunday evenings at 9 o'clock UK, 4 PM Eastern, 1 PM Pacific on Facebook and YouTube. And check out our Fantha Tracks Radio Friday night rotation every Friday night at 7 PM UK time for new episodes of the Fantha from Down Under, Planet Leia, Desert Planet Discs, Start Your Engines, Collecting Tracks, Cannon Fodder, and special episodes of Making Tracks. And that's me done for this episode.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's the Fantha from Down Under.